Okay, we're going to do science page 154. Okay. Science page 154. Now we already read this in class last week. And then we did the experiment about how do mountains affect climate. Remember where we used the cups and we made the mountain and we put the paper over it and then we sprayed the water on it and we used the fan. And if you remember, the water only got one side of the mountain wet because the mountain blocked the precipitation from going on the other side of the mountain. So we're going to read today about the different climates around the world and also how mountains can affect that as well. Okay, so I want you to have your book out and I want you to follow along with me. Okay, so dry climates. Before we start, I want you to look at this picture down here, okay, on page 154, and I want you to look at the plants and the ground, as well as this picture on page 155. And I want you to look at all of the different kind of plants and trees that you have in both of those pictures. And I'm going to have you answer the question as to how are those two different plants, how are they different, the two areas, okay? All right, so the picture shows two places with different kinds of climate. They get different amounts of precipitation or rain, right, each year. Scientists use precipitation, the amount of rain that they get, and their temperature, like how hot or cold it is, to classify or make groups of climates. So the scientists look at an area and say, okay, it's very dry and it's very hot. We're going to put that in a certain type of climate group, okay? Or this place is very cold and they get a lot of snow every year. We're going to put them in a different type of climate group. Or this place is very hot and it gets a lot of rain. We're going to classify or put that in a different climate group, okay? Places that get little rain or snow have dry climates. That makes sense. They don't have a lot of rain. They don't have a lot of snow. We would consider that dry. The most familiar places with a dry climate are considered the desert. Deserts have an arid or very dry climate. Remember that we learned that sometimes the authors will give us a hard word and then they'll give us a comma, the definition, another comma, and they'll continue. So the word arid means very dry, okay? And they tell us that right there in the sentence because they know that's a difficult question. The one up here even says the temperature to classify, comma, or makes groups of, comma, climate. So classify means to make groups of. Arid means very dry, okay? They get less than 25 centimeters or 9 inches of rain each year. The plants in a desert can store water. They use this water during long periods with no rain. So the plants actually like suck up the water and then they hold it inside the leaves of the plant in order for when it gets later, they can still use that, okay? Think of like putting water in your mouth and not swallowing it and you're just holding it in your mouth. That's kind of what the plants do. They suck it up and they hold on to it to when they need it more. Many people think of deserts as hot places, but some deserts are very cold. Most of Antarctica is considered a cold desert. No plants grow in the Antarctic desert. Remember, the Antarctic is down at the South Pole. Okay, the Arctic is up at the north. But, you know, that's just a big, it's very cold. There's a lot of ice, but it is considered a desert, which is, you know, not what we would think of a desert. Other dry climates have enough rain for short grasses and small bushes to grow. These areas have more water than a desert, but not enough for a forest to grow. The Great Plains in the center of the United States has this type of dry climate. Many areas in Africa, Asia, and South America also have this type of climate. Okay, infer. Remember in reading we make inferences. We kind of like draw a conclusion. Why are plants are often far away from one another in the desert? Okay, why do you think this is? This is kind of a tricky question that I'm not sure we would naturally know. So I'm gonna help you out with it, okay? So the plants kind of space themselves out because if you think about it, there's only so much water, so they're almost kind of like fighting for water. So if they have their own little area, they can suck up all the water that might be deep down below the sand there. And then the other plant, maybe if it's 5 or 10 feet away, kind of has their own pool of water there, okay? So you can write that down right underneath here, or it's right here, so you can just pause it and write that down right there. Okay, wet climates. Scientists classify wet climates by temperature. Tropical climates are found in the warmest places of Earth near the equator. Plants grow quickly in tropical climates. Places with a tropical climate often has a dense forest. Okay, so here's a nice way to look at the different zones here, okay? So you have, this is the equator, okay? And the equator, I've shown you on the globe, okay? On the globe here, that this dark blue line is the equator, and it's an invisible line that runs all the way around the center of the Earth, okay? So around the equator, so here it goes right through Brazil, right here, okay? A little bit through Colombia, Ecuador, okay? And then through the middle part of Africa, right through Kenya, okay? And then also the Philippines are just a little bit north of the equator, so it's still gonna be pretty hot and humid there, okay? And there you go. Hawaii's still pretty far north of the equator, but it's closer to the equator than we are. Okay, we're a little bit further north here, okay, than Hawaii. So Hawaii is closer to the equator, which is why Hawaii is a little bit more humid than we are, okay? So if you look at where the equator is, okay, going above and just below it are its tropical zones. And then you have a little bit further away and a little bit further away is the temperate zone. And then, of course, at the opposite ends, you have the polar zones, okay? So what it was saying is scientists classify wet climates by temperature. Tropical climates are found in the warmest part of the Earth near the equator. Plants grow quickly in the tropical climates. Well, sure, there's a ton of water. There's a lot of rainfall. So you're going to have the plants growing a lot more. So you are going to see a lot of forest in a tropical climate there because you're going to have a lot of rain that's going to help that grow. Okay, places in the middle of continents, north or south of the tropical zones, are called temperate continental climates. So that is this area right here. Okay, this kind of yellow part, and then this would be considered the temperate down. Oh, sorry. This is the temperate here. So that kind of the very tip of South America. Most of the United States, if you look, is right in that temperate zone. Okay, and Europe. Okay. These places have hot summers. Winters are cool or cold, and the temperate marine climates are located near the coastal areas. The climates in these places are milder than the temperate continental climates. Places with polar climates are very cold in the winter. Well, that makes sense. I mean, what are we talking about? We're talking about the very northern part of Canada, right? Iceland and Greenland, the northern part of Russia, and then you got the Arctic up here, and then you have the Antarctic down here. So that makes sense that those would be considered the two polar zones, okay? That's basically the North Pole and the South Pole. Even in the middle of the summer, the temperature usually stays below 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. No trees grow in the polar climate zones. Smaller plants grow very quickly in the summer. In some places, the soil below the surface stays frozen all year long. Okay, so why do you think the climates are milder along the coastal area? Okay, so here where you have like the water, it's going to be milder because the water kind of keeps it that way. Okay, the water keeps the climate pretty mild. Okay, let's go to the next page. Now, I like my map much better than this map. Okay, so this is a better map to use. It's just a little bit more clear. This one is saying, here's the equator, okay? And they're giving us tropical zones, and then they're kind of like dividing this area and saying, you know, this part is subtropical. Okay, sub means below, right? Subtropical. Okay, so you have your equator, you have tropical, subtropical, tropical, subtropical, and then you have temperate, and then you have subpolar here, and then polar, and then subpolar, and then polar, okay? It's a lot, but that's okay. We just want to kind of get a general feeling for it. So if we're looking at the tropical zone, okay, tropical is red here, and the weather is hot and humid. So that's all around the equator, right? If you're looking at this, around the equator, this is going to be hot and humid, all in this tropical zone. As you move into the subtropical zone, the summers are hot and the winters are mild to cool, okay? So it gets a little bit milder, okay? And then the temperate, the summers are hot to very warm and the winters are cold, okay? That's our temperate. And then subpolar, we're moving from temperate to subpolar, not quite polar yet, but pretty close. Subpolar, summers are short with long and cold temperatures and the winters are long and very cold. And then you get to polar. Temperatures are cool to very cold all year long, okay? All right, so let's take a look at some of these questions here. Certain kinds of grass have roots that grow more than 2 meters, which is 7 feet, below the surface. What kind of question could you find out, could you ask to find out in which climate zone these grasses are likely to grow? So you're trying to figure out, okay, so there's some sort of grass that the roots go 7 feet below the surface. I mean, why would they do that? That's the question. Why would a plant have a root that's 7 feet? That seems pretty significant. Most roots don't go that deep. So the question would be like, why are those roots, are they sucking up water that's in a very dry climate? Maybe it's in a desert and they're trying to get to that water table that's down way below the surface a little bit. So that might be a question you might be asking. And then if you look at the reading choice, compare and contrast down here, okay? What's the main difference between a tropical climate and a polar? Well, let's look at it here, okay? Here's your tropical, okay? And here's your polar. I mean, you should be able to answer that. So I want you to take a minute and answer that. What's the difference? What do you think the climate like is different compared to a tropical compared to polar zones, okay? Okay, now suppose your movie has many scenes with snow. Okay, so you're filming a movie and you're in charge of finding the location that you want to do it, and it has many scenes with snow. Like, where do you want to film this? In Brazil? Or in northern Canada? It's a good question. Okay. Climate extremes. Would you like to live in a place where the average winter temperature is 50 degrees below 0 Celsius, which is 58 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit? That's what winter temperatures are like in Oymyakon, Russia. The remote village is generally considered the coldest area on Earth where people live. In contrast, that means like the opposite, the average summer temperature in Death Valley, United States, is 45 degrees Celsius, which is 113 degrees Fahrenheit. The highest temperature recorded in Death Valley was 57 degrees Celsius, which is 134 degrees Fahrenheit. That is really, really hot. Mountains along the coast prevent precipitation from reaching the valley. Interesting. We just learned that in our science experiment the other day. Mountains along the coast prevent the precipitation from reaching the valley. That means it doesn't get to rain there, which is also going to not cool it down at all, right? Because it's not getting any water droppings. The shape of the valley prevents the hot air from leaving because remember, we also looked at that map of California showing that you have mountains on each side and they come together in a valley. So if you have like mountains like this and there's your Death Valley down there, that hot air down there, first of all, these two mountains are preventing the water from coming in. It's just raining out here. And then you get all that hot air in there and it really can't escape. It's just trapped. So it's hot and dry, okay, in Death Valley. The shape of the valley prevents the hot air from leaving. These factors and the intense sun make Death Valley very hot. Not a fun place you want to visit in the wintertime. So write about it. In your science notebook, describe what you think living in one of these extreme temperatures will be like. How would you deal with the extreme cold or heat? I'm going to have you answer that question right now. And then I'm going to give you these two questions as well. So you'll answer those right now. All right, good job.